As Election Day in the U.S. draws nearer, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump focus on each other's character flaws. A museum in the Netherlands boosts the enjoyment of exhibits with high tech. And airplane food with a high-end twist. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. The race for the White House is extremely close. Democrat Hillary Clinton and Republican Donald Trump are both courting voters at a frenetic pace. Recent polls indicate that many voters are likely to make their decision based on how they feel about the personal attributes of the two candidates. VOA national correspondent Jim Malone has more on how character issues are dominating this year's campaign.
In the final days of the campaign, White House hopefuls Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are focused primarily on each other's flaws.
I love this stuff.
The renewed FBI probe into Clinton's use of a private email server while Secretary of State has pushed the issue of her trustworthiness front and center, and Trump wasted little time in seizing on it.
This is the biggest political scandal since Watergate. And it's everybody's deepest hope that justice, at last, will be beautifully delivered.
Clinton may be on the defensive, but she's also lashing out at what she believes are Trump's character flaws in the final days of the campaign.
Donald Trump is out there stoking fear, disgracing our democracy, and insulting one group of Americans after another.
Hillary is the one who broke the law over and over and over again.
Presidential campaigns often center on issues like the economy, foreign policy, and immigration, but this year is clearly different, says expert Matt Dallek.
This race has primarily become about character and about personality. And I think this issue of character is going to remain front and center. I don't think it's going away. And I think to an unusual degree, issues in policies are not really as central as they typically are.
Polls show many voters question whether Clinton is trustworthy, but an even greater number fear that Trump lacks the temperament to be president. The perceived flaws of the two candidates have dominated the campaign, says West Virginia University analyst Patrick Hickey.
I think that this is a very odd American presidential election in that both candidates are viewed unfavorably by the majority of the American people. You know, usually that might happen to one candidate, but not both.
The questions about character have been center stage throughout the campaign. Trump went after Clinton over the email issue in the second presidential debate.
If I win, I am going to instruct my attorney general to get a special prosecutor to look into your situation.
In the third debate, it was Clinton who went on the offensive over Trump's controversial comments about women.
Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like.
With all the attacks on character, the election outcome likely will depend on which supporters are more motivated to vote, says Patrick Hickey.
And this is definitely a kind of anti-election as opposed to a pro-election, which I think means on Election Day, turnout is really going to be what matters, which side can turn out voters to actually get to the polls.
One of the longest and most divisive U.S. election campaigns will come to a close next Tuesday. And for many voters, the end can't come soon enough. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
Early voting is underway in some 37 U.S. states, with millions of Americans casting ballots before the November 8th election. VOA's Chris Simpkins reports that voters in the key battleground state of North Carolina are ignoring the divisive campaign rhetoric and are voting on the issues most important to them.
North Carolina voter Scott Herrick was eager to cast his ballot in this year's presidential contest. He says environmental issues drove his decision.
I do believe that climate change is a factor in why I'm voting today, and I believe that Hillary Clinton has kind of the same philosophy on this that I do. I do not believe that we really had a traditional election between a Republican and a Democrat this year. I think we had an election between a Democrat and kind of a totalitarian.
We need change. We are about change.
Republican Lewis Hutchinson voted for Donald Trump. He's concerned about the loss of American manufacturing jobs and wants tougher immigration measures.
I like Trump's idea about closing the borders to the Muslims and making it, now I'm not saying to keep the Muslims out. I'm saying get it where they come in legally.
Voter Sylvia Richardson immigrated to the United States from Africa. She doesn't agree with Trump's immigration policy.
Trump is talking is like he's going to take everybody away from the United States. No, everybody, most of the people here, they are immigrants. So, of course, there are bad people that he can, take away from. But among those people, there are good people too.
College student Maddie Hain was a first-time voter. She says women's rights and education are key issues for her.
The children really shape what happens in the future. If they don't have a strong foundation, it's really hard for them to grow.
Giba McDaniel also views education as a big issue. She wants her son Malik to see democracy at work.
I have 3 children, and him being 14 years old, I wanted him to see simply that you just need to vote.
Malik can't vote until he's 18, but his mother hopes he understands it's his right to participate in the democratic process. Chris Simpkins, VOA News, Greensboro, North Carolina.
But a South African judge ruled on Wednesday that a report of alleged influence peddling in government should be released. The action follows President Jacob Zuma's move to drop a court bid to delay its publication. Meanwhile, on the streets of Pretoria, thousands of people marched against Zuma. Police fired stun grenades and used water cannons to disperse the demonstrators who had marched to the Union Buildings, the seat of government where Zuma's offices are located. The protesters carried Zuma must go posters. The report by the public prosecutor, constitutionally mandated anti-graft official, examines allegations of corruption that have triggered the biggest crisis of Zuma's presidency, costing him support within the ruling party. But for more on the growing tensions in South Africa, journalist Tuso Khumalo joins me live via Skype from Pretoria. Tuso, now we know that since becoming president way back 2009, Zuma has survived several corruption scandals. What seems to be different this time around?
This is a very difficult one for President Zuma. As you're saying, he has survived a lot of scandals. We had the Nkandla scandal. We had a time when he was accused of rape. But what makes this one particularly different is that it shows a president who has practically taken the country and handed it over to foreigners, because these people, the Gupta family, they're not South Africans. And this is what is angering most South Africans. And further than that, you found that the appointments of ministers, irregular appointment of ministers that are being alleged in this report, these are the ministers of finance. Former Minister of Finance, Tlatlhanene, was sacked, and Van Rooyen was supposedly coming from the Guptas. So these are people who are holding critical places in the government, in the lives of South Africans. This is what makes this one very different and difficult for President Zuma.
Yes. Now, so how has this recent allegations, have they impacted the ANC itself?
The ANC is very divided because of these allegations. We have heard big guns from the ANC. In fact, we had the chief whip of the party in parliament saying everybody should step down, including President Zuma, and the executive committee of the party because they failed the nation. He cited a number of things where the party has failed, especially when you look at this report. You have a lot of ANC senior members. You have got Fetchment who said, I was promised millions of rands by the Guptas when President Zuma was in another room. And we had the Deputy Minister, who is also an ANC member, Deputy Minister of Finance, Jonas, saying, I was promised up to 600 million rands if I agreed to take over former Finance Minister Shantlanene's post and play along with the Guptas. So you have an ANC that is now very divided. Senior ANC members, even the veterans, coming out saying, no, this cannot happen under our watch.
Now, the officials seem to be fed up. Now, on the streets, people are saying Zuma must go. Are they just fed up with President Zuma, or do they possibly want the party out of the system, ANC?
People are fed up. The economy is not doing very well. A lot of people are not working. They are unemployed, and poverty is just deepening in South Africa. So you've got people saying, but Zuma is spending millions at his house in Kandla, and he's allowing the Guptas to put their hands into the state coffers. So people are really desperate to have Zuma out because they've said he cannot be the president. He has failed them. When he took over the economy, of course, things were not green enough. But now people are saying things are worse than before. A lot of people are unemployed. So you've got voices that are coming out from the opposition and opposition supporters, and also voices coming out from the ANC saying the man has failed to rule the country. It is time for him to go, and they try someone else.
Well, from the look of things, Zuma might be on the way out. We'll watch and see what happens. Tuso, thank you very much for your reporting. Now, that's Tuso Kumalo reporting live via Skype from Pretoria in South Africa. Well, a group of Ethiopians used their automobiles to protest on the streets of Washington, D.C. on Tuesday. The demonstrators drove their cars adorned with Ethiopian flags and honked their horns to raise awareness on what they are calling gross human rights violations by the Ethiopian government. The protesters caused traffic jams around the U.S. Capitol building, saying they want the Obama administration and the U.S. Congress to speak out about the killings and mass arrests going on in Ethiopia. Africa 54's Esther Githu spoke to Abdi, one of the lead organizers of the protest.
We are protesting here, supporting for Ethiopian people struggle. Now our people under the state of emergency, of course, for 25 years under the state of emergency, but now in the name of the state of emergency, our people killed, suffering. So a lot of problems, the dictatorship in Ethiopia, they control our economy. So we stand here for voiceless people.
Quite some commotion there. Now, the protesters also called on the Ethiopian government to lift the state of emergency and allow freedom of the press, including social media. Well, turning now to Iraq and the battle for Mosul, Iraqi special forces seized control of state television facilities inside Mosul on Tuesday as a loose-knit combat coalition allied with Baghdad pressed on an offensive to drive Islamic State extremists from the city. Kurdish and Western journalists invaded with the force said it was meeting stiff resistance inside the city, encountering concrete blast walls and roadside bombs planted by IS fighters to slow the Iraqi advance. The Iraqi military also said an armored division was approaching southeastern districts as part of a push to free outlying villages and encircle the city. Separate coalition units pressing toward Mosul from the north were also reported in control of several key villages. Meanwhile, in Geneva, United Nations spokeswoman Ravina Shamdazani said IS fighters are continuing their push to forcibly move thousands of civilians closer to Mosul to provide extremists inside the city with human shields.
We also have reports that they are putting people very close to their offices and to military installations, to what would be military targets. Now, that seems to support the assertion that they are planning to use these people as human shields, as well as to make sure that the area is heavily populated with civilians to frustrate a military operation against them. They are also killing some people that they are abducting, especially people who formerly belonged to the Iraqi security forces.
United Nations estimates show up to 1 million people could become displaced as fighting intensifies in Mosul. Nearly 18,000 people have already fled the city since the operation was launched on October the 17th. The long-awaited offensive comes 2 weeks after the coalition of Iraqi and Kurdish forces, backed by Shia militia, Sunni Arab tribesmen, and U.S.-led airstrikes, began the largest military operation in the country since 2003 to clear the city of IS. On to Europe now. French authorities on Wednesday began transferring about 1,500 unaccompanied migrant minors to reception centers across the country as a standoff with Britain over who takes care of the youth drags on. Britain is obliged under European Union rules to take in minors with verified family ties. The minors have been housed temporarily in converted shipping containers in Calais. Tensions between London and Paris have mounted in recent days after President François Hollande urged British Prime Minister Theresa May to accept Britain's share of responsibility for the minors. Hollande says that minors who do not leave for Britain will be taken care of by the French state, adding that in a few days there would be no more foreign minors in Calais. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, appreciating treasures of the past with technology of the future. Stay with us.
Health news and notes. This is Living Better.
Against the backdrop of antiquities at Jerusalem's Israel Museum, a former Israeli soldier is getting an ancient body decoration, a tattoo. But it's not just for display. The skin art is covering a battle scar.
And by tattooing over those scars, what we're doing is hoping to erase as much as possible of that painful memory.
That's Craig Dershowitz with Artists for Israel, which organized the project. This soldier was shot through the body and chose to have the scar covered with an image of a bullet morphing into doves.
The fact that we're able to give them a tattoo that kind of can help with closure, can help with their post-traumatic trauma, it's very important, and it does help people.
Luke Westman with Artists for Israel, helping the injured transform their physical and emotional scars into sources of pride and healing. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
I am Sheikha Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Well, in today's business report, in less than 2 hours, the U.S. Federal Reserve will announce its decision on whether or not to raise interest rates. How will the decision impact Africa, and what global markets are watching as the U.S. national elections is in their home stretch? Well, joining us from New York with all the answers is Africa 54's business correspondent Jill Malandrino. Hello, Jill.
Hello, Vincent. So while traders do not expect a rate hike out of this meeting, the odds are quite high that we will see one in December. Even though thousands of miles separate the U.S. from Africa, this is why it matters for the continent. Historically, rising interest rates have gone hand in hand with an appreciating U.S. dollar, and the exchange rate between developing nations and the U.S. tends to widen. As a result, dollar-denominated debt owed by developing nations increases and becomes unmanageable. That said, we're only looking at a 25 basis point hike, and we are still in a sub-1% interest rate environment.
Now, arguably, the outcome of this national election will impact global markets the most, right?
Oh, yeah. This has been an election for history, to say the least. An increase in stock market volatility of and immediately following the election is starting to play out now following Friday's surprise with the FBI reopening its investigation into Hillary Clinton's email. The S&P 500 dropped about 0.5% to ultimately recover most losses by the market close. I think that's the type of reaction we will see next week in terms of short-term impact, just like we saw in June with Brexit. Regardless of the outcome, several analysts do not expect a major election-related long-term market disruption for several reasons. Most notably, the stock market historically has performed well around elections as policy uncertainty is resolved.
Now, Jill, you just mentioned that, mentioned policy uncertainty will be removed, but we know that the candidates have not spent much time, in fact, addressing the issue. So why do you think that markets will take this in stride?
That's an excellent question. Campaign rhetoric is mainly just that. It's rhetoric. LPL Financial made some good arguments regarding this point. Priorities for the candidates do not necessarily match the amount of time that they spend discussing various issues on the campaign trail. We have a system of checks and balances in the U.S. For example, Donald Trump will not immediately slap tariffs on imported goods and start a trade war. Hillary Clinton will not break up big banks, even if she could do it unilaterally. So at the end of the day, corporate America is very adaptable. Over the past 80 years, many disruptive policies have come and gone, as have recessions, periods of high inflation, interest rate spikes, Federal Reserve rate hike cycles, wars, terrorist attacks, etc. Through it all, S&P 500 companies have grown profits by an average of 8% annually. So you can see that the markets ride this out sort of on their own stride.
Well, Jill, obviously we'll be looking at what happens on the 8th and 9th in the markets across the world. Thank you very much for your reporting, Jill. Well,
Thank you.
That's Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino reporting live from New York. Well, a museum in the Netherlands is adding some excitement to its exhibits. Visitors will wear an augmented reality headset by Microsoft called a HoloLens. A holographic computer built into a headset will allow them see, hear, and interact with holograms at the museum. VOA's Deborah Block has more.
The Dutch National Museum of Antiquities doesn't have enough room to put all its artifacts and exhibits on display. So the museum asked researchers at Delft University of Technology to find a way to let more visitors, especially younger people, experience what the museum has to offer through holograms. They came up with the HoloLens.
Right now, 80% of the stuff that they have at the museum, they cannot show. So, and that's a shame because there are so many beautiful artifacts and there are so many hidden secrets, so to speak, of the past that people cannot see. So by using the HoloLens, people can virtually visit the exhibit and see so much more.
This includes exhibits like the ancient Egyptian temple of Tefa, which is not on display, but was reconstructed inside the museum in 1971.
Right now I'm seeing a temple. I'm walking towards it. It's quite big. It has 6 pillars on each side. Now I'm walking inside the temple.
The HoloLens, it enables you to have an augmented reality instead of a virtual reality, which means you can still see the temple, you can still feel the ancient vibe around you, so to speak. It doesn't shut you off from the outside world, and it just has a lot of opportunities and possibilities for you to interact with your surroundings.
The research team is also using the HoloLens to scan every room in the temple.
And then we can get these 3D models, and through different softwares, we can replicate this in the computer and then add on features such as different images, movies, illustrations, animations, as well as features where you can get closer, interact with.
The program is still under development, but museum officials hope that in the future, the HoloLens will serve as an interactive tour guide for exhibits that may be hidden from public view. Deborah Block, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, fine dining with no turbulence. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headline.
citizens. In South Africa, multiple protests held around Pretoria, demanding that President Jacob Zuma resign amidst corruption allegations. In Ivory Coast, despite boycotts, a majority vote approves a new constitution in a referendum held over the weekend. In South Sudan, a UN inquiry finds that peacekeepers failed to respond to attacks on civilians by government troops in Juba. In Benin, a businessman and politician, Sébastien Ajavon, has been arrested on suspicions of dealing drugs after 18 kilos of pure cocaine was confiscated at a port. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Haiti Adams-Fitzpatrick. Let's take a look at what's trending. A Stockholm hotel says it has become the first in the world to introduce a chatbot concierge capable of helping guests book taxis, play music, get restaurant recommendations, even tell jokes. Visitors to one suite at Clarion Hotel Amaranton are trialing the new technology. If successful, it could be introduced in hotels across Scandinavia. The hotel's chatbot concierge is part of a wider trend towards connected Internet of Things technology. The ultimate goal is a smart, high-tech home where all devices, be it your lights or your toaster, talk to each other. Meanwhile, in neighboring Denmark, forget visits to museums and art galleries. At the world's first virtual reality store in Copenhagen, students can go on a field trip to a virtual world. Organizers hope to inspire and educate the next generation of VR developers, ensuring Denmark plays a role in the fast-developing technology. Virtual reality headsets are still a relatively new thing that many are yet to try out, including myself. Experts believe the recent launch of Sony's PlayStation VR headset will make VR a reality for the average gamer. And finally, lots of legroom and a table set for fine dining. It's what most people wish for on a plane, and that is exactly what Lily Airways is offering its Chinese customers. There's fine wine and gourmet food, but there's a catch. The plane doesn't make it to the runway. Guests order food at a check-in desk and are then given plane tickets. Staff then usher them through a corridor bridge and onto the plane. The restaurant currently offers only French and Russian cuisine, costing $50 to $60 per person. Up to 80 diners can be seated at any one time. And that, of course, is what is trending today. Vincent, it's back to you.
Eddie, thank you very much. And that's our show for today. Now, be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com for more news. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show, African News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa, that's between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. An envelope is a flat paper container used to send a letter. So what could it possibly mean to
push the envelope?
There has got to be more to this expression.
Did you see what Adam is wearing today?
Yeah, well, he has always liked bright colors.
That guy really likes to push the envelope. I could not get away with wearing that to work.
You know, I like that he is pushing the envelope. This place needs some more color.
To push the envelope means to go beyond the limits of what is usual. It can also mean to be very creative. This expression comes from airplane pilots. The word envelope in this idiom is actually a mathematical term. It means a set of limits that may not be safe for a plane to go beyond. And that's English in a minute.